Lonely Cowboy was given a limping woman as a joke. He made her the pride of the riders. The sun rose slowly over the vast, golden prairie, spilling light across the wide-open fields where the wind whispered through the tall grasses. In the distance, a lone cowboy rode steadily, his hat pulled low against the heat, the leather of his boots creaking softly with every movement. His horse, a chestnut stallion with a white stripe across its face, moved with practiced grace, ears flicking at the sounds of the morning. This cowboy was known to everyone in the nearby town, not for his words, but for his work. He was Eli Turner, a man of few friends, but whose hands could tame the wildest cattle and whose eyes missed nothing. Eli had lived alone for most of his adult life. His small cabin, tucked near the edge of a dry creek bed, was modest and simple. The furniture was rough-hewn and sturdy, and the walls were decorated only with a few old photographs of the land he loved and a hand-carved saddle rack. He didn't mind solitude. The quiet suited him. The work of riding cattle, repairing fences, and caring for his horse filled his days, leaving little time for gossip or unnecessary company. People in the town whispered that Eli preferred the land to people, but Eli knew better. It wasn't the people he avoided, it was the distraction. Life on the prairie required focus, and Eli had learned long ago that the land demanded respect. Despite his stoic nature, Eli had earned the respect of those around him. Other cowboys admired his skill, the townspeople trusted him to help with difficult tasks, and even the ranchers in the neighboring counties knew that when Eli Turner offered his hand, it was a hand they could rely on. But respect was not the same as friendship. Eli's life had been lonely, and sometimes on quiet nights when the wind howled through the canyons, he felt the ache of that loneliness. Yet he rarely allowed himself to dwell on it. Work kept him grounded, and the prairie kept him company. One spring morning, the town was alive with unusual energy. It was the day of the annual rodeo, an event that drew cowboys, families, and travelers from miles around. Stalls were set up along the dusty streets, the smell of fresh hay mixing with the aroma of roasted corn and sizzling meat from the vendors. Children ran with painted faces, laughing and chasing each other, while horses neighed impatiently in the pens. Eli, however, was not here for the festivities. He had promised a neighboring rancher he would help with the morning cattle drive, and he preferred the simplicity of work to the noise of the celebration. But news travels fast in a small town, and even a man as solitary as Eli could not escape the whispers. By late morning, a group of rowdy riders had gathered, plotting a prank meant to tease and humiliate him. They were known for their mischief, and on this day they had decided to give Eli a gift. The plan was simple. They would present him with a young woman who, due to a leg injury she had suffered in her childhood, walked with a noticeable limp. To the pranksters, this was a joke, a way to tease the serious and solitary cowboy by giving him a companion whom they believed could never match the demands of ranch life. Her name was Clara Wells, and she had grown up in the town, familiar to nearly everyone. Clara was a quiet girl, known for her gentle spirit and her persistence despite the difficulties she faced with her leg. She was not fragile exactly, but her limp marked her as someone different in the eyes of the townsfolk. Many assumed she would never be able to manage the rough tasks of riding and working cattle. But Clara was determined in her own way. She had learned to adapt, to find strength in her own body and mind, even if others doubted her abilities. Yet she had no idea what awaited her that morning at the rodeo. Eli noticed the commotion as he rode along the edge of the town. Laughter and shouting carried across the streets, and he could see the group of riders gesturing toward the center of the square. Curiosity flickered in him, though he did not slow his pace. He had learned long ago that small-town antics were usually fleeting and rarely worth his attention. But when he reached the square, he saw Clara standing there looking anxious and unsure, while the riders laughed and called out to him. "Hey, Eli," one of them shouted, a smirk on his face. "We thought you could use some company. Here's a gift just for you." The crowd around them chuckled, and Eli's eyes met Clara's. There was hesitation there, a quiet fear, but also a spark of determination he couldn't quite explain. He could see that she was not accustomed to such public teasing. Her hands gripped the edges of her coat tightly, and her shoulders were drawn in slightly, as if bracing herself for what was coming next. Eli's first instinct was to ignore the crowd and ride on, but something made him stop. Instead of laughing or showing embarrassment, Eli approached slowly, his horse's hooves raising small clouds of dust. He looked Clara in the eyes and nodded once. "You coming with me?" he asked quietly, his voice calm and steady. There was no mockery, no laughter, just an offer. Clara blinked, startled. She had expected ridicule or scorn, not kindness. Slowly, she nodded, trusting the stranger in front of her who, despite his reputation, seemed to see her not as a joke but as a person. The crowd around them erupted in more laughter, thinking Eli had no choice but to accept the prank. But Eli simply gestured for Clara to mount, and the horse whinnied softly as if sensing the new companion's nervous energy. As they rode away from the square, leaving the chatter and teasing behind, Clara felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. The open prairie stretched before them, endless and golden under the high sun. Eli didn't speak much, and Clara didn't either, but the silence was not uncomfortable. There was something steady in the way Eli rode, something that gave her a sense of security she had rarely felt. For Eli, this was different from anything he had experienced. He had faced storms, wild cattle, and even dangerous outlaws, but the arrival of Clara brought a challenge of a different kind. Not a challenge of skill, but a challenge of patience and understanding. He could see the uncertainty in her movements, the way she hesitated when climbing over fences or adjusting her position on the horse. But he also saw potential. Where others might see weakness, he saw a foundation that could be strengthened with care and persistence. That evening, back at his cabin, Eli prepared a simple meal over the fire. Clara watched quietly, unsure how she had ended up here, but feeling a strange sense of belonging she had never known. The walls of the cabin were plain, but they had a warmth that came from the steady rhythm of life, something predictable and safe, unlike the chaos of the town square. As they ate, Eli spoke a few words about the land, about the cattle, about the importance of understanding the rhythm of the prairie. Clara listened intently, absorbing each word. Over the next few days, Eli introduced Clara to the routines of ranch life. She learned to ride with balance, to anticipate the movements of the horses, and to understand the needs of the cattle. Each day brought new challenges, and each day Clara struggled, but she also learned. And Eli, patient and observant, guided her every step of the way, never mocking, never rushing, always encouraging. The prank that had been intended to humiliate had unwittingly sparked something remarkable. In the vast, open spaces of the prairie, away from the mocking eyes of the town, a partnership began to form, not one based on obligation or pity, but on trust, respect, and the quiet understanding that both Eli and Clara were stronger than they had realized. Evenings were spent under the stars, where the wind carried the soft sounds of the prairie. They talked about simple things at first, the weather, the animals, the work. Slowly, Clara began to share pieces of her life, her hopes, her dreams, and her fears. Eli, in turn, shared stories of the land, of cattle drives, and of the quiet moments that defined a cowboy's life. Neither spoke of the prank anymore, as if acknowledging it would give it power. Instead, they focused on the work, on learning, and on building a new understanding between them. By the end of the first week, Clara was already moving with more confidence. Her limp, which had drawn so much attention in the town, seemed less like a limitation here, less like a defining feature, and more like a part of her story. Eli never treated it as a problem. He adapted his instructions to her abilities, guiding her with patience and care. Clara felt a pride she had never known, the pride of learning, of surviving, and of being seen not as weak but as capable. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the prairie, and for the first time in a long while, both Eli and Clara felt that sense of possibility that comes when one is ready to face life's challenges, not alone, but together. The town might have intended to make a joke, but on this land, under the endless sky, something entirely different was taking root. The mornings on the prairie were quiet but demanding. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when Eli was already awake, tending to Dusty, brushing the horse's coat until it gleamed, and preparing the cattle pens for the day ahead. Clara, though still learning, rose with determination. Each day was a challenge. Her legs ached from the long rides, her arms grew sore from lifting hay bales, and even the simple act of walking across uneven ground tested her balance. Yet she refused to give up. Eli watched her quietly as she worked, his eyes sharp but not judgmental. He noticed the way she hesitated when stepping over fences, the way she leaned slightly to compensate for her limp, the way she grimaced when her muscles protested against tasks that seemed easy to him. But he also saw something else, a spark of resilience, a refusal to quit despite the difficulty. Each small victory, each task she completed gave him quiet satisfaction. The first time Clara attempted to rope a calf, the result was messy. The rope tangled around her legs, and the calf dashed past her with a cloud of dust, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Eli, standing a few feet away, did not rush to help. He simply waited, letting her struggle for a moment before stepping forward. "Try again," he said, his voice steady and calm. "You'll find the rhythm if you don't give up." Clara's face flushed with embarrassment. In town, everyone would have laughed, but here on the open land, there was no audience, just guidance. She got to her feet, brushing dirt from her clothes, and took the rope again. This time, she adjusted her stance, thinking of how Eli had moved during his demonstration. Her first throw didn't succeed, but the second did, and she managed to snag the calf's neck just long enough to steady it. A quiet smile tugged at her lips, one that Eli noticed and approved of with a slight nod. The work continued, day after day, each task pushing Clara further than the day before. She learned to saddle Dusty properly, to check the fences for weak spots, to mend torn saddlebags and frayed ropes. Every task tested her patience and her strength, but with Eli's steady guidance, she began to notice her own progress. Her limp still slowed her at times, but she found ways to compensate, adjusting her balance and movement. Each small improvement fueled her determination. One afternoon, Eli took Clara out to the open plains for a long ride. The horizon stretched endlessly, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink as the sun began its descent. He led her through a series of exercises designed to improve her riding balance and control. At first, Clara struggled to keep up, her horse stumbling slightly on uneven ground. But Eli's voice was always calm, offering encouragement rather than criticism. "Lean with the horse," he instructed. "Feel its movements, don't fight them." Clara followed his guidance, her movements gradually becoming smoother. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, she had completed several rounds of maneuvers without falling or losing control. Exhausted but exhilarated, she looked at Eli, expecting praise. He merely nodded, a rare smile flickering across his face. "You're learning fast," he said. It was a simple comment, but for Clara it carried immense weight. Recognition from someone like Eli, who rarely spoke unless necessary, was more valuable than any applause from the townsfolk. Life on the ranch was not without setbacks. One morning, a sudden storm swept across the prairie. Dark clouds rolled in, heavy with rain, and lightning split the sky. The wind howled, tearing at the tents and rattling the wooden fences. Eli and Clara worked tirelessly to secure the animals, herding the cattle into safer areas and reinforcing loose panels on the pens. Clara's leg faltered once as she tried to climb over a fence during a flash of wind, but Eli was there, steadying her with a firm hand. "Don't let it scare you," he said. "You've got this." The storm raged for hours, but by evening the sky cleared, leaving the prairie glistening with rain. Clara was drenched and exhausted, yet a sense of triumph filled her. She had faced the storm and she had endured. The experience strengthened her resolve and deepened her trust in Eli. She realized that the land itself, harsh as it could be, was also teaching her resilience and courage. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's skills continued to improve. She learned to anticipate the movements of cattle during drives, to navigate rough terrain without losing balance, and to handle unexpected challenges with composure. The limp that had once marked her as fragile became just another part of her presence, something she had learned to work with rather than against. Each day brought a quiet victory, a sense of accomplishment that no one in town could take away. The other riders began to notice the change as well. Some whispered in surprise when they saw Clara ride alongside Eli during morning drills. Others doubted she could keep up during the long cattle drives, assuming she would tire or falter. But Clara, fueled by determination and guided by Eli's patience, proved them wrong time and time again. Each successful ride, each completed task, was a small triumph against doubt and expectation. One day, Eli and Clara were called upon to help a neighboring rancher who was struggling with a stubborn herd. The cattle had scattered across a wide area, and the rancher feared they would be lost. Eli and Clara rode out together, tracking the herd through valleys and hills. Clara's confidence showed in her posture, in the way she communicated with the animals, and in the calm determination she displayed under pressure. At one point, a young calf ran toward a steep ravine. Clara acted without hesitation, positioning herself to guide it safely back to the herd. Her heart pounded, but she remained focused, remembering Eli's lessons on patience and timing. The calf stopped, swayed, and then followed her guidance back to safety. Eli's eyes met hers, and for the first time he allowed a rare, approving smile to cross his face. Evenings were spent around the campfire, where they shared stories and reflections on the day. Clara began to open up about her life before the prairie, the difficulties she had faced, the doubts others had cast upon her, and the small triumphs she had achieved despite them. Eli listened quietly, offering wisdom and perspective when needed. He shared stories of his own, tales of cattle drives, storms, and nights spent under the endless sky. Through these shared moments, a bond formed between them, one built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Clara's growth was not limited to physical skill. She began to understand the rhythm of the land, the patterns of the animals, and the subtleties of life on the prairie. She learned to read the wind, to anticipate sudden changes in weather, and to move with the natural flow of her surroundings. This knowledge, combined with her determination, made her a capable and confident rider, someone who could contribute meaningfully to the ranch work rather than simply participating. The town began to take notice, too. Whispers of Clara's progress spread, and those who had once doubted her began to reconsider. Some still doubted, clinging to old assumptions, but others watched in admiration as she handled tasks that had once seemed impossible. Her determination, courage, and skill began to earn her the respect of even the most skeptical riders. Clara's relationship with Eli also deepened. What had begun as a partnership of necessity transformed into one of mentorship and friendship. Eli's quiet patience and steady guidance allowed Clara to flourish, while Clara's determination and resilience reminded Eli of the importance of faith in others. Together they faced the challenges of the prairie, the harsh sun, sudden storms, and demanding work, growing stronger with each passing day. By the end of the season, Clara had become an integral part of the ranch. She could handle long rides without fatigue, manage cattle with precision, and navigate the terrain with confidence. Her limp was no longer a barrier but simply a part of who she was, a testament to her perseverance and strength. Eli, once the solitary cowboy, found satisfaction in her growth, pride in her accomplishments, and a rare sense of companionship that had been missing from his life for so long. Though the town had intended the initial joke to humiliate, it had inadvertently set the stage for transformation. Clara had faced challenges, endured hardships, and grown stronger than anyone had expected. And Eli, through his patience, guidance, and quiet belief in her potential, had helped her discover a strength she had never known she possessed. The prairie, vast and unchanging, became a place of learning, growth, and unexpected triumph. Clara's journey from uncertainty to confidence was a testament to determination, resilience, and the quiet power of mentorship. And as the sun set over the golden fields, Eli and Clara rode together, no longer defined by the prank that had brought them together, but by the trust, skill, and respect they had forged through months of hard work and shared experiences. The rodeo was only a week away, and the town was buzzing with excitement. The streets were lined with stalls selling ribbons, ropes, and fresh-baked goods, and the sound of laughter and music drifted across the dusty square. For most of the townspeople, it was a time for celebration, competition, and showing off skills. But for Clara, it was the test she had been preparing for in silence, far from the town's prying eyes. She woke early that morning before the sun had risen and stood outside the small cabin, watching the horizon glow pink with dawn. Her heart beat fast with nervous anticipation, but there was also a sense of calm. Months of hard work on the prairie had prepared her for this moment, though she still felt a flutter of doubt. Eli stood nearby, brushing Dusty's coat until it gleamed. His calm presence grounded her, reminding her that she was ready, even if she didn't fully feel it herself. "Remember," Eli said quietly, not looking up from the horse, "this isn't about anyone else. It's about what you can do. Focus on yourself, on your horse, and on the rhythm you've built. Everything else will follow." Clara nodded, feeling a wave of reassurance. She mounted her horse, adjusting the saddle carefully and checking the reins. Dusty, sensing her determination, stomped lightly and flicked his ears forward, ready to move. Together, they rode toward the rodeo grounds, the morning sun rising behind them and casting long shadows across the prairie. When they arrived, the reaction from the crowd was immediate. Whispers followed her every step. Many remembered her limp, some still doubted her abilities, and a few chuckled quietly, thinking this was another joke meant to amuse Eli. But Clara held her head high. She felt the months of practice, the long rides, the early mornings and sore muscles, all coming together into a quiet confidence. Her first event was the obstacle course. Riders had to guide their horses through a series of fences, barrels, and tricky turns. Many skilled riders struggled, and even seasoned cowboys stumbled along the way. Clara's heart raced as she approached the starting line, her hands gripping the reins tightly. She remembered Eli's lessons: feel the horse, anticipate its movements, and trust yourself. As the bell rang to start the course, Clara urged Dusty forward. The horse responded smoothly, moving with confidence as Clara guided him over the first fence and around the barrels. Her legs shifted naturally, her posture steady, her movements in rhythm with Dusty's. For a moment the crowd held its breath, surprised by the fluidity and grace of a rider they had once assumed incapable. A sharp turn came next, and Clara felt her confidence flicker for a split second. Dusty hesitated, his hooves skidding slightly on the loose dirt. But Clara adjusted instantly, leaning into the motion, guiding him with subtle pressure on the reins and a shift of her weight. Together, they navigated the turn flawlessly. Cheers began to rise from the crowd, though some still looked on in disbelief. The final challenge of the course was a narrow gate, followed by a quick dash across the arena to the finish line. Clara's hands tightened on the reins, her pulse quickened, but she remembered Eli's words: focus on yourself. She guided Dusty toward the gate, giving him gentle encouragement, and they passed through without hesitation. A surge of exhilaration filled her as they crossed the finish line. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then the crowd erupted in applause, and even the skeptical riders exchanged surprised glances. Clara dismounted, her heart still racing, and looked at Eli. He nodded, a rare smile lighting his face. "I knew you could do it," he said simply. No fanfare, no exaggerated praise, just quiet acknowledgement. But it meant more to her than any public recognition could. The next event was a cattle drive demonstration. A group of young calves had to be guided into a pen using skill, patience, and control. This was more than just speed. It required strategy, understanding of the animals, and confidence. Many riders underestimated Clara, assuming her limp would slow her down or that she would lack the strength to handle the animals. But Clara had spent months learning exactly how to anticipate the movements of cattle, how to stay balanced on her horse, and how to communicate with Dusty without unnecessary force. As the calves scattered across the arena, Clara calmly guided Dusty forward. She adjusted her position with precision, directing the horse with subtle cues. The animals responded to her movements, and one by one, they followed her guidance into the pen. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she worked with focus and determination, proving skillful and capable. When the last calf entered the pen, cheers erupted louder than before. Clara allowed herself a small smile, pride filling her chest. Among the spectators, the riders who had once laughed at her now whispered to each other, their expressions a mix of astonishment and grudging respect. They began to realize that Clara was not the fragile, timid girl they had assumed. She was strong, capable, and determined, her spirit unbroken by doubt or ridicule. The final event of the day was the most challenging, a timed obstacle ride that tested endurance, speed, and agility. Riders had to navigate a series of fences, barrels, and sharp turns, all while maintaining control of their horses and demonstrating precision. Many skilled cowboys stumbled, some losing valuable seconds, while others struggled to maintain balance. Clara's heart pounded as she approached the starting line, aware of the eyes of the crowd and the skeptical murmurs around her. She took a deep breath and urged Dusty forward. The horse responded instantly, moving with confidence. Clara guided him through the first few obstacles with smooth, controlled movements. Each jump, each turn, required complete focus, but she trusted herself and her training. As they reached the final stretch, Dusty's hooves kicking up clouds of dust, Clara felt a surge of exhilaration. She could hear the crowd cheering, but she focused only on the rhythm of the ride, the connection with Dusty, and the lessons Eli had taught her. They crossed the finish line without a single misstep. Clara dismounted, her legs trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline, and felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She had faced doubt, ridicule, and fear, and she had proven not only to the crowd but also to herself that she was capable. The applause that followed was thunderous, and for the first time Clara felt truly seen, not as the girl with a limp but as a skilled, confident rider. Eli walked up to her, dusty calm at his side. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said simply, "You've earned every bit of this." There was no need for exaggeration. His quiet acknowledgement carried more weight than any ribbon or trophy ever could. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, knowing that her hard work, perseverance, and determination had been recognized by the one person whose opinion mattered most to her. The other riders approached, some hesitant at first, but all offering genuine congratulations. The laughter and teasing that had marked their first encounter were gone, replaced by respect and admiration. Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. She was no longer the subject of a joke. She was a rider in her own right, a capable participant in the community she had once only observed from the sidelines. That evening, as the sun set over the prairie and the rodeo grounds quieted, Clara and Eli rode back to the cabin. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air carried the faint scent of hay and dust. Clara felt exhausted but exhilarated, her body aching from the day's events but her spirit soaring. She had faced her fears, overcome doubt, and earned the respect of those who had once underestimated her. Eli rode beside her quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. "You've come a long way," he said, his voice calm, "not just in skill but in confidence. You've shown them all what it means to believe in yourself." Clara nodded, her eyes reflecting the colors of the setting sun. She realized that this journey had been about more than just the rodeo. It had been about trust, perseverance, and discovering the strength that comes from believing in oneself. The joke that had brought her to Eli and the ranch had become a turning point, transforming doubt into respect, weakness into strength, and uncertainty into pride. As they reached the cabin, Clara felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had learned that the hardest challenges often lead to the greatest growth, and that true respect is earned through effort, determination, and courage. The town had intended to mock her, but she had emerged stronger, skilled, and confident. And in the quiet companionship of Eli, she had found guidance, mentorship, and an unwavering belief in her potential. That night, as the prairie settled into silence, Clara reflected on her journey. The path had been difficult, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but it had also been rewarding. She had proven to herself and others that limitations do not define a person. Strength, courage, and determination do. And as the stars shone above the wide, open plains, Clara felt a sense of pride she had never known. The pride of a rider who had earned her place, not through luck, but through perseverance, skill, and heart. The days after the rodeo were quieter, yet full of a new kind of energy. Clara walked through the town streets, and for the first time she noticed the way people looked at her, not with pity, doubt, or amusement, but with respect. Some nodded politely as she passed, others smiled with admiration, and a few young girls whispered excitedly, inspired by her courage. Clara had expected mixed reactions, but the warmth she felt from the town surprised her. The joke that had brought her into Eli's life seemed far behind her now, replaced by recognition earned through hard work and determination. Back at the ranch, life returned to its usual rhythm, but Clara's place in it had changed. She no longer hesitated when handling the horses, her movements fluid and confident. She guided Dusty across the prairie with ease, managing the tasks of the day without struggle. Eli watched her from time to time, quiet pride in his eyes. He had trained many riders, but Clara was different. Her determination had been forged not only through instruction, but through the obstacles she had faced and overcome on her own. She had proven herself, and Eli knew that her success was earned, not given. Clara's confidence extended beyond the ranch. She began helping other riders in town, teaching them small lessons she had learned from Eli. Her approach was patient and encouraging. She demonstrated how to guide a horse through uneven terrain, how to anticipate the movements of cattle, and how to stay calm under pressure. People who had once doubted her abilities now sought her guidance, eager to learn from someone who had achieved so much despite the challenges she had faced. One afternoon, Eli asked Clara to help with a new group of young riders who had just started learning the basics of horseback riding. The children were hesitant and nervous, unsure of their balance or confidence. Clara approached them calmly, showing them how to mount their horses, adjust their reins, and stay steady in the saddle. She encouraged them with gentle words and demonstrations, reminding them that everyone starts small and grows with practice. The children began to respond, their laughter filling the air as they learned to move with their horses. Clara smiled, realizing that she had become more than a skilled rider. She had become a mentor, just as Eli had been to her. Word of her abilities spread beyond the town. Other ranchers invited her to assist with cattle drives, seeking her guidance on tricky terrain and stubborn herds. Clara worked alongside experienced cowboys, no longer the timid or fragile figure they had once assumed. She earned their respect through competence, patience, and courage. Even the riders who had played the prank months before approached her with newfound admiration, admitting that they had underestimated her. Clara accepted their acknowledgement gracefully, knowing that respect must be earned, not demanded. As the months passed, Clara's bond with Eli deepened. They spent long hours together on the prairie, riding cattle, repairing fences, and planning for the next season. Conversations flowed more easily now, moving from practical advice to personal stories, hopes, and dreams. Eli shared memories of his own struggles, the loneliness of years spent alone, and the lessons the land had taught him. Clara, in turn, shared her reflections on growth, resilience, and the journey that had brought her to this point. Their friendship was quiet but profound, built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and purple, Clara and Eli rode to the top of a hill overlooking the prairie. The view stretched endlessly, the fields shimmering in the fading light. Clara felt a sense of calm and fulfillment wash over her. She reflected on the months that had passed, the challenges she had faced, the moments of doubt, and the triumphs that had followed. She had learned that strength was not measured by the absence of difficulty, but by the courage to continue despite it. Eli broke the silence, his voice steady. "You've grown into a rider people admire, Clara. But more than that, you become someone others can trust, someone who leads by example. That's the hardest lesson to learn." Clara looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You believed in me when I wasn't sure of myself. You didn't see my weakness, you saw my potential." Eli nodded. "And you fulfilled it. You've turned a challenge into strength, Clara. That's something not everyone can do." The seasons changed, and Clara's reputation as a skilled and reliable rider continued to grow. She became involved in organizing local rodeo events, helping newcomers learn the ropes, and assisting in training programs for young riders. Her presence inspired others, showing them that determination, patience, and practice could overcome obstacles that once seemed insurmountable. The town, which had once laughed at the idea of Clara as a rider, now looked to her as an example. Parents encouraged their children to watch her ride, to learn from her focus and discipline. Young girls and boys dreamed of one day having the confidence and skill she had shown. Clara realized that her journey had created more than personal success. It had inspired an entire community to rethink what was possible. Despite her growing responsibilities, Clara never forgot her own journey. She continued to ride with Eli, practicing new techniques, learning from his experience, and sharing her own insights. The bond between them remained strong, a quiet partnership built on trust and shared goals. They worked together not for recognition, but because the land and the animals demanded care, and because they had come to rely on each other's guidance and companionship. One particularly challenging day, a herd of cattle had broken free from a neighboring ranch. Eli and Clara rode out immediately, coordinating with other riders to bring the animals back safely. The terrain was difficult, with steep hills and rocky paths, and the cattle were scattered across a wide area. Clara's heart raced as she maneuvered Dusty through the obstacles, guiding the animals with skillful precision. Each calf she redirected felt like a personal victory, a testament to the growth she had achieved over the months. By the time the herd was safely returned, the sun was setting, and the riders gathered to rest. Some of the more experienced cowboys approached Clara, shaking her hand and praising her ability to handle the challenge with calmness and authority. For Clara, this recognition was different from the applause of a rodeo crowd. It was respect earned in the real work of the prairie, in situations that tested not only skill but courage and composure. The evening ended with the riders gathering around a campfire. Laughter, stories, and the aroma of cooking meat filled the air. Clara sat beside Eli, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. She realized that the joke that had started her journey had become a story of transformation, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her growth. As the night grew darker, the stars appearing one by one in the vast sky above, Clara reflected on the lessons she had learned. She understood now that true strength was not measured by physical ability alone, but by determination, resilience, and the willingness to face challenges head-on. She had learned to trust herself, to adapt to difficulties, and to find courage even when doubt crept in. Eli watched her quietly, noting the changes in her demeanor, her confidence, and her presence. He had seen many riders come and go, but Clara was unique. She had transformed not just in skill, but in character. The bond they had formed, the trust they had built, and the challenges they had faced together had created something lasting, a partnership that went beyond work, beyond mentorship, beyond friendship. In the months that followed, Clara continued to grow, both as a rider and as a person. She took on leadership roles in cattle drives, guided inexperienced riders, and helped maintain the ranch. Her presence brought a sense of calm and confidence to those around her. She became a symbol of perseverance, skill, and quiet strength. The townspeople who had once laughed at the idea of her abilities now looked up to her. Children sought her guidance, neighbors sought her help, and even the riders who had once mocked her acknowledged her skill and courage. Clara had earned her place, not through luck or favoritism, but through hard work, determination, and the guidance of someone who had believed in her from the beginning. One evening, as the sun set and the prairie glowed in the fading light, Clara rode with Eli to a quiet spot overlooking the fields. Dusty moved steadily beneath her, and the wind carried the familiar scent of grass, dust, and freedom. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction and peace. She had faced her fears, overcome doubt, and transformed a situation meant to humiliate into a journey of growth and pride. Eli spoke quietly, breaking the silence. "You've become the pride of the riders, Clara. Not because of talent alone, but because of who you are, your courage, your determination, your heart. That's what people remember, and that's what makes you strong." Clara smiled, feeling the truth of his words in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "You saw me when no one else did. You taught me to believe in myself." Eli nodded, a rare expression of emotion on his face. "And you turned belief into action. That's something few people can do." As the stars began to shine above the prairie, Clara realized that her journey had come full circle. From a timid, uncertain young woman, hesitant and doubted by those around her, she had become a skilled, confident rider and mentor, earning the respect of the town and the pride of the riders. The challenges she had faced had shaped her into someone stronger, more capable, and deeply admired. The story of Clara Wells, the girl who had been given as a joke, became a tale told in the town for years. It was a story not just of skill, but of perseverance, courage, and transformation. And through it all, the quiet cowboy who had believed in her from the start, Eli Turner, remained by her side. A reminder that trust, guidance, and faith in others could turn even the smallest spark into a flame of greatness.